Hello, everybody. That was Brian, my partner, coughing our way into our newest episode of Get Lost. This is the show where I have been frustrating the majority of people who watch my channel because I'm talking about a TV show that's like 20 years old. Why? Because it is my all-time favorite television show, and I want nothing more than to sucker more people into watching it and dealing with this. Because the truth is, it is worth your time. It is an epic show, and everybody I've talked to that's a fan, I've just found a new great friend, including this guy, Mr. Fire Guy, who's been willing to spend several nights talking with me about Lost.
I feel like every time we do this, the show gets like 10 years older. Like I feel like last time it was like 10 years, and then it's 15 years old, and now it's a 20-year-old show.
It's like a 50-year-old show at this point, right? I mean, it's old.
Like time doesn't even matter anymore. That's weird. You know, you just go forwards and backwards, and then, you know, what is time?
Yeah, right. So now it's all time. Yeah, I'm going to be younger when we're done with this, right? Isn't that how it works?
I thought that's how this worked. That's why I'm here.
So thank you all for coming by. If you're watching this on the replay, or if you're one of the people I'm about to shout out in the chat, I really appreciate you taking the time. If you've never watched this show, I'm going to give my pitch. It is worth your time. There's nothing quite like it. It should be streaming still on Hulu. I don't have Hulu. I have the DVDs. But you should go and check it out and enjoy it, because there really is nothing like it. It's a lot of fun. And if you decide to go rewatch it, as you finish season by season, come back through the playlist that I've got for this particular series, and you can enjoy me chatting with Perry Comics, me chatting with Bueller, and of course me chatting with this Fire Guy right here about Lost, because it's amazing how big this community is and how many people have found a little place to talk about this show.
That's
in
correct.
The chat, I have hooked Perry Comics in a big, big way in rewatching this show. And he was first in the chat. He's been in there for like 5 minutes before we started, and I ran about 10 minutes late because TJ says I'm on John time. So it's part of my Wednesday. I want to stay with the Unlimited show, but I got a show that starts right after it, so I tend to be a little bit on the late side there. So very sorry. I'm also sorry that you had a rough day today, TJ, and I'm hoping that me talking about a 30-year-old TV show doesn't bring you down in some way worse.
That's the bare minimum we can hope for, right? Is to at least be not depressing. Let's try. Let's try for that.
And there's nobody else in there. I'm hoping that there are more people that I can't see, but I appreciate all of you for taking the time to enjoy
both of you for coming here.
All of
you.
The YouTube community love.
That's right. There's people in the future now who are not here now, but who will be here in the future. So hello.
This is going to be a historical document, Ryan.
Exactly.
People will come and find this show and be like, wow.
This was in the past.
This is how he spent his time when the environment was falling to pieces all around him and the economy was all over the place. This is how he spent his time?
Nah.
Yes. So season 4 is the season that really takes I don't want to say a U-turn, but certainly a hard right on what the show Lost was for the first few seasons. This was a show centered around a group of survivors on an island, and they were flashing back to who they were before they got there. And this system seemed to really last all the way through until the episode that Perry and I reviewed most recently, which was the first in a series of Flash Forwards, where we finally got the chance to see what our island life for our characters might be if they ever left. Where would they be? And in this case, we get season 4 looking at what we learned to call the Oceanic Six. These 6 people who have made it off of the island in the future. Yet we don't know how they did it, and we certainly don't know why they are behaving so unusually in the future, i.e., we have Jack begging to go back to an island that he worked so hard to get away from, and Kate seemingly living high on the hog with the nice car and a sweet outfit and all, and looking fine and all that stuff, not on the run, not looking like a criminal. And so we get this season of how did they get to this place? And what does it say about our new survivors? Ryan, how do you feel about this concept of moving from flashbacks to flash forwards?
For me, this is the first time I've ever watched this show whenever I've given Lost a rewatch, I start at season 1 and I go all the way through season 6 and I watch it all continuously. This is the first time I've ever like singled out one season in the middle and just watched season 4 by itself. And doing that, you kind of get to realize that it just in the name of it, by flashback forwards and then present day, flash forward is kind of implied to be like the end of the timeline, but really there's stuff that happens after that. Like in a way, those flash forwards are flashbacks for the present day content that happens in the final seasons of the show. So really it's all interconnected, and it's just one more way that they kind of use time as a way to tell this long form story that's just so much deeper than other programs.
Yeah, and I remember watching at the time, and obviously that finale from season 3 was like this huge eye-opener moment. It's the very middle point for the series, and it was a great chance for them to sort of hit the reset button a little bit. And I liked the idea that they didn't have to play the same notes anymore. I think even when you and I were talking and watching season 2, there was elements of repetition that were happening. Okay, we got another episode where we're looking at Charlie the drug addict and trying to get clean, or we're looking at Sun the spoiled Korean girl and how she treats people in her life, or the repetition of it got old. And the flash forwards, for me at least, were the opportunity to hit new notes for these characters. Jack was this character who was always dealing with dad issues. Okay, well now we make the issue not dad, we make the issue him. It's Jack. He is his own problem. And I liked that. It's not a huge change to how he behaves, but it is a huge impact on why he's acting that way. And same with Kate. She's given an out. She doesn't need to run anymore. It's not about running. It's about sticking. What would make her stick? And I kind of like the way they do this stuff. And of course, you get your Saeed as the hitman. How do you hate on that?
Those moments are pretty badass. I feel like we need to give a general overview of this season before we get too deep into the flash forwards. You want to give it a shot? It's kind of hard to, I guess, but season 4, as you described, it's right after you figure out that the show is now about to start telling future stories, I guess, if that makes sense. But on the island, it deals with this boat that discovers them, this freighter that discovers the island and sends out like a team of scientists to kind of study the island, I guess you could say. But there's also back waiting on the boat like this commando squad of horrible people with big guns and big muscles. And the whole season really is kind of based around this boat and the flash forwards and how they all kind of tie together. And by the end of this season, I kind of feel like both, like the boat story is all wrapped up, but also I don't remember flash forwards really being a thing in the final seasons.
It is not in the final season, obviously, but in season 5, the flash forwards do continue because it tends to be about getting back to the island, right? A lot of season 5 is about those people, especially the first half of season 5. How do we get back to the island? This year's season 4 is looking about how did we get off of the island. A lot of the mysteries for those flash forwards center around this group of, I will say 5, and they call them the Oceanic 6, but it's 5 main characters and a baby.
Right.
3 men, 2 kids, 2 women and a baby. Like, how do they get off the island? And so you have this kind of like constant, like, what I loved watching it live, at least, was this feeling of, God, how do these 5 end up together? Like, how is this possible? They'd get together for a little bit and then they'd split way across the island. And you're like, there's just no way. How do these people get back together? Or that somebody else would be with them. And you're like, how does that person not make it? There's lots of that little. So for me, there was a lot of the writers were clearly playing with the viewer as like, no, you think that's going to work out? Nope, that's not. How is that going to play? Oh, you don't know. You don't know. I'm just going to. It's like there's a little 3-card Monty going on there. We're just shuffling the pieces around.
It's one of the most entertaining aspects of this season, I think, is following that question. Like, you have like a poster of 6 heads of people who get off the island, and then all throughout the season, like Sawyer's hanging out with them for a lot of it, and you're like, what's he doing? Why isn't he there? The finale in particular, as it's the last moments you're going to get to kind of see these pieces fall into place, and that's when you really kind of see exactly how they managed to get off the island and back to civilization.
Yeah, and so as Ryan mentioned, there's this freighter offshore. And it's the first time that we've really seen the outside world trying to interact with the island. And in this case, it's seemingly run by Charles Widmore, this sort of mystical villain that we don't see a whole lot of up to this point. And he's got this mercenary squad, and then this quirky scientist group run by Jeremy Davies, who is phenomenal and just consistently entertaining as this most oddball scientist, both in flashbacks and in the present. He just is consistently entertaining. The scientists arrive first, along with the excellent pilot, Frank Lapidus. And we get a little bit of meeting them because those are characters that are going to continue to be important as the show goes on. And like Ryan says, these freighter characters, we quickly wipe them out over the course of this season. I don't think a single one of them lasts beyond this season. It's mostly these scientists and Frank that kind of get a life beyond season 4. How do you feel about what my friends used to call the freighter folk?
I loved it. I loved this group of people, especially on a rewatch. I remember originally I was kind of give and take on I loved Faraday from the beginning. That was no questions. He was perfect. He remains perfect. But I think Charlotte in particular, the anthropologist on the team, she was very snooty is a word that comes to mind. She's very
British.
Yes, exactly. A very aggressive and a kind of a know-it-all personality, standoffish. And it's not until later, I think, that I kind of you get a better appreciation for her, I think, after next season.
She doesn't care about our characters, and that instantly makes us not trust and like her very much. She could give a crap if all of our characters die. She's got more important things she cares about, whereas I think Jeremy Davies genuinely is like, come on, they're not all bad. They don't need to die. They're stuck in a bad situation. He feels genuine empathy, I think, for these characters, whereas Charlotte's just like rolling her eyes about even having to deal with these characters that we've fallen in love with over 3 years.
That was the probably the coolest part of the second episode of this season was kind of a group flashback. It showed little miniature stories of each one of these 4 scientist people on the freighter and how they became aware of the crash of Oceanic 815 and how they kind of got to be on that freighter in the first place and join this mission, this expedition, if you will.
Yeah, so we have Daniel Faraday, who is sort of the physicist, the scientist who's looking at the sort of unusual qualities of the physics of this island. You have Charlotte, who's looking more, like you're saying, biology, the anthropologist. She's been finding artifacts like, polar bear carcasses off of the island. You've got Frank Lapidus, awesome pilot. And I love the twist that he was supposed to be the pilot of Oceanic 815, but due to an issue, he did not fly the plane. And he is able to tell right away that there's this fake at the bottom of the ocean and that he knows that's not the real pilot because he knows him well enough.
The wedding ring.
Just too cool. And then you have, oh my gosh, I just forgot his name, Miles, the fake, but probably real, maybe actually real psychic who can speak to the dead. Like I hear dead people, not see dead people, who is joining them to try to solve the mysteries of this island because he can communicate with the people who passed away there.
I kind of feel like Miles in particular, his storyline, the difference between season 4 when he was introduced and then in season 5 when they gave him a little more development with what happens in that season. I don't necessarily want to spoil, but it feels like his storyline in particular was kind of tacked on. I feel like they don't mention that in the same way that they do Charlotte's history kind of in season 4, if that makes any sense.
They do, and I think that all the characters have a nice little what we learned about them here versus what we expand on in season 5 is kind of cool. I want to shout out Chris Barrett came by and DJ Ron Ninja. Thank you for coming by. That's my brother. Oh, that's your brother? Sorry.
It's okay.
I keep forgetting your brother's handle. I gotta remember this better.
It's hard to read.
Did I read it right? DJ Ron Ninja?
No. Now I'm gonna butcher it, but I don't even want to read it now. Now I'm all embarrassed.
Fail. But thank you guys for coming by, much appreciated. I love all four of those characters that they introduce here. If I had to rank them, it'd be tough. I think Faraday's number one, Miles, Frank, and then like you're saying, Charlotte's probably a distant fourth. Something about Frank Lapidus' story always really tickled me. I thought it was just funny. And his attitude of like, if I was the pilot, you wouldn't have crashed. They're like, where's the wreck of the helicopter? He's like, are you kidding me? A wreck? What kind of pilot do you think I am? It's right over there. He's always bragging about what a badass pilot he is. And it builds to, of course, the season 5, season 6 stuff with him. My favorite Frank Lapidus line to this day, though, is in season 6, I think it is, when he says, we're not going to Guam, are we? It's just like so beautiful. Dude, he gets on the plane. Right? He gets on the plane. He's just a normal everyday pilot. He gets on this plane in the future and he looks over, sees all these guys that he recognizes, and he's like, oh, crap.
Can you imagine, though, like looking around and seeing that group of people on your plane? I'll be like, I'm off.
We're not going to Guam, are we? It's so good. But I love Frank. I just think he's such a great character. And then, of course, now we've got Miles and the creepy kind of cool things he does. You know, he's doing his little like freak out thing, and he's communicating. Yes. It's really kind of, and you can't tell. We've seen so many fake psychics at this point. We can't tell how real or legit this might be. But he keeps hitting, he keeps pitching strikes all the way through.
Yeah, he comes across as authentic in my view anyway, but maybe I'm just a sucker.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and he's also just really fun and funny. And I think in general, all three of the men in this group of 4 have a real great sense of humor, and I think it makes them very enjoyable, even when they're being complete dicks, which Miles is regularly a complete dick.
Oh, yeah. Seeing him interact with Sawyer is really good, too, because they both butt heads and call each other names, and they have a tendency to nickname people a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely a similarity going on there.
Yep.
Okay, so sorry, did I miss something funny? Hydra Collectibles, thanks for coming by. He has an incredible collection, just awesome collection of lost memorabilia that he's like created and crafted, I think, almost all himself. And I'm hoping to have him on in August sharing some of these cool things. So much appreciated. He's there in the chat. I'm going to have to sub him up here at some point. Oh, he's got kids. I totally understand. I'm with you 100%. But thank you for coming by. For you, is there? Let's get back to the flash forward side. This idea of these characters off the island. Is there one of them that you were really surprised by the first time you saw it, where you're like, whoa, I did not predict
Ben.
This
100%.
story.
100% Ben.
Why Ben?
Because it starts with him laying in like a heavy parka off in the desert, right?
He's in the desert.
Into the sky. Yeah. And he's steaming. And he just sits up and he looks around and he's in the middle of nowhere and he's clearly shocked and out of breath and just confused. And just from that moment on, it's just kind of like a quest.
And he's seemingly got a wound. He's like bleeding from one sleeve. Yeah, it's such a mind meld. And on top of which, by this point, we've met the Oceanic Six, and he wasn't one of them.
Nope.
So then it's like, okay, how did this guy get off of the island?
I love that you find out, too. It's not that much. You don't have to wait too long for this mystery to get solved.
No, because you're talking about an episode that's near the end of this 4th season. But we met Ben. We realized he had made it earlier because in the Economist, which is Saeed's first flashback, when we see Saeed is like an assassin and he's killing people after his wife's death, we see Saeed with a bullet wound stumble into a veterinarian hospital and getting stitched up. And then the reveal that the person stitching him up is Ben, and he's like pulling the strings for whatever Saeed's missions are.
And before streaming existed, you had to wait a week to figure out what was going to come out next. So you had nothing to do other than watch that again and go online and like dig into it with all the other nerds. And that was just something that is not a thing anymore. I see. It feels like.
It was very painful, very difficult. Although I will say, I think a lot of networks are starting to maybe pull back from that Netflix story system. I think I hear that the Disney streaming with the Marvel shows is not going to be the full release that they're going to do. That sounds wrong. The complete drop of all the videos. They're gonna space those out week by week. And I know HBO has never buckled to that format they've kind of stuck with week by week. We're going to drop the videos. I kind of appreciate digestion time a little bit. And
it's something
it certainly added to the joy for me on this show.
I agree. And especially this week with Stranger Things being out, and it's like you can't discuss it with people because not everybody watches it at the same speed. Like you have some friends who are crazy and watch it all in the first 8 hours that it's out, and then some people have to wait till the next weekend to finally finish it. And it's like by the time everyone's on the same page, no one's on the same page anymore, and it's just kind of there. Lost has had a more prolonged discussion that I liked a lot more.
Absolutely. Is there an episode from this season that you feel like nailed it, was really the high watermark? Because for me, when we did our list of top 5 episodes, my number 1 is in this run.
Yep. I almost don't even count that one because it's so good, and it's like
just separate it out,
right?
It's better than everything.
I almost didn't even watch it when I rewatched this season again, but of course you have to. So that one obviously I think is the high watermark of this season. So I don't even consider discussing it almost. you can say that.
But so, yeah, it's funny. I show this off every time, like all my notes, right? Rewatching, marking everything down, and then there's that episode. It's just blank.
Yep, it's like we already know that one.
I've watched it so many times, and I know it so well. I actually just like wrote the title down, left the space, and then I just started watching it, and I couldn't write anything. I didn't want to pause it. I just wanted to watch it again. I'm talking about the episode The Constant, which is not a real flash forward as much as it is a like the record is skipping.
It's a Desmond episode.
And Desmond, this character who's been affected by the island very unusually and has been having these visions of the future, starts skipping within his own life, very Quantum Leap-like, and gets to the freighter and finds out that other people have had similar problems and that they're all dying because of it. And that it's possible the only reason he's not dying as fast is because of what happened to him in the hatch, but that he's clearly on the same trajectory. And the only thing that'll save him is to find a constant, somebody that will sort of wedge him where he should belong in time. Somebody that was from this time in the past and where he is now that will kind of ground him. Right. And he learns about this because his present self speaks with Daniel Faraday, the scientist, tells him, go find the old me, the one from back in the past, and he will guide you a little bit in this whole thing. So they have this kind of like back and forth with Faraday. It's just a phenomenal episode. On top of which, all of it feels like the ultimate Lost Christmas episode.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it is very Dickens-esque, which is perfect for a Desmond episode. Very Dickens.
That's also true. That's his book. This show feels so much like a comic. Like it's a damn shame. And I know we've gone over this topic over and over, but I just feel like Lost needs some sort of presence in the comic book world, and it's such a shame that there's no comic.
Yeah,
this kind of storytelling is perfect.
It does have this great because of like panels where you're allowed to miss things in between. Lost naturally leaves things out and skips around a little bit, and I think it does seem to fit in that way. So yeah, The Constant is my all-time favorite episode, and it's like the classic TV Christmas episode, but in a Lost sort of messed up kind of way. It's also like probably the most romantic of any of the episodes of the show because it's all about a man and a woman who belong together, but because of a million reasons are not together, and both are very hurt by this. And so it's just a really, really cool episode. On top of which it's like super nerdy and science-y and has all these great little like white rat in the maze kind of stuff, science lab stuff.
Like a ray gun.
Right, yeah, right. Yeah. It feels like almost like a Twilight Zone kind of thing sometimes.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
So for me, all-time fave. Do you have another? I'm sorry that I robbed the best one then. Is there a second best, an episode that you're like, oh my gosh, this episode?
That's why I don't consider that one, honestly, because it's such a good standalone episode that it can almost be removed from the season.
Absolutely.
Entirely. I really liked the back half of the season when when Keamy and the military people start coming in and the stakes just get turned up to 11. And I always love the way Lost ends the season. Like they always have such good like ends, and then the finale episode just always spikes it up. Like the end run of every season has always been top notch.
And this one in particular, because it's like a 3-hour finale.
I got joined by the cat again.
Hey, you know,
and left starring just as quickly. That was Ollie.
You know, I know that when I watched it, it aired on 2 nights. You saw the first episode on one night, first hour, and then you came back a week later and saw the 2-hour finale. But it was all titled one thing: There's No Place Like Home. So it's like a 3-hour final episode.
It really is, and I would probably put that one as my single favorite non-constant episode of this season.
And I will say that episode has probably the biggest tearjerker moment for me, or at least one of the big ones for both like happy, sad. It's the episode. This episode does not have a single character flashback, right? It's got a whole slew of looking at the Oceanic Six, and it really has that moment when they land, when they get off of the plane. And it's funny, it's the only scene that's supposed to be Hawaii, when they're in Hawaii.
Yeah,
and they're getting off the plane. They finally landed in America, and they're getting off the plane, and you're getting to see each one of them meet a member of their family that we've seen only in flashback up to now, or at least chronologically. Like we've seen them in flash forwards. You get to see the way they're greeted. You see Jack greeted by his mom. You see Hurley greeted by his parents. And it's just this really powerful sequence. And I love that nobody's there for Kate.
Yeah, that was kind of sad.
All she's got is Aaron. And this whole season, for me, you're looking at somebody like Kate and you're wondering, why doesn't she run? Why isn't she doing whatever? You know, she's loved Sawyer. She's sad that he's not there. Why isn't she doing something about it? This is the moment that explains it for me. She's not going to run with Aaron. She wouldn't subject somebody else to what she's been through.
To the fugitive life.
And watching the way she sort of like pulls him to her when she's looking at all of these friends of hers have people there for them. And she's got nobody. It's a heartbreaking moment, powerful moment. And the music is like on a 10. And then Hurley, of course, grabs her and pulls her over to his family because he knows what she's feeling. But it's just a great moment for me. I just love that sequence.
That's a good one. Plus, it's got Michelle Forbes in there, and that lady's in every TV show I've ever seen. It's
Battlestar Galactica,
right? I don't understand. She gets in every single show.
Absolutely. Now the episodes right before this one are also pretty special because you're getting what is it? Where is it? The Shape of Things to Come, which I know made your top 5 list.
Hell yeah, it did.
This huge Ben flashback that you were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. But for me, as good as the flashback or flash forward stuff is, it's the Ben on the island versus Kimi stuff that's amazing. I'm mentioning it because Hydra Collectibles threw it out right now. He says summoning the smoke monster was intense.
It was. That's one of my. I remember watching that live, and I had to like get in touch with all my friends the next day. I was like, nerd. We just nerded out. It was great. That was too cool.
I will say the only thing that keeps that episode from not being my favorite is the like gratuitous red shirt stuff.
That was hilarious.
It's comedic. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I don't know how you call yourself a nerd if you don't know what I mean by red shirts. But it's the Star Trek idea that there are these completely useless people in the background whose only purpose is to take the bullet, right? They're there to die. And so you have Kimi's mercenaries attacking Dharmaville. They're attacking the village, and our characters are running around trying to be safe. And really, the only guy that we have running around is Sawyer. And he's running around with his little pistol. He's shooting at guys. He's hiding behind like a rail, like a little post. He squats down behind this post, and it's getting pinged with bullets all around. But they can't seem to hit this like giant 200-pound.
He's a big dude too. Yeah,
who's like sticking out all around, but they only seem to hit the post. Right. And he does this 3 times. He's like, everybody get down. And then somebody runs out and gets shot. And then he's like, get down. And then somebody else runs out and gets shot.
They run out to like check on the person who got shot. And he's like, no, go inside. And they get out too. It's 3 people. It's boom, boom, boom. Like, it's hilarious.
It's the most ridiculous sequence. I almost feel like they added the third person because they're like, this is going to be freaking hysterical. Like, we're gonna out red shirt Star Trek.
We got to thin the herd. Probably what they were thinking. Just wrap up some of these background beach people and get them home.
And the best part about it is then they blow up the house that Claire is in. And he runs through. He's still running, and they're still shooting, and he's fine. And he digs through the rubble, finds Claire, who's perfectly okay, picks her up, runs back through the gunfire, gets into the house safely, and doesn't get wounded in any way. And the only people that we know for sure are okay are Claire, who was in the house that blew up, and Sawyer.
Because that makes sense. The two people who were in the most danger the entire assault were perfectly fine.
So that sequence is the only thing that keeps that episode from being top 10 or whatever for me, or top 5 for me. It's so good outside of that. And of course, Ben going under the house and summoning the smoke monster, and even his back and forth with Kimi, bartering over his daughter's life, is really intense.
And like seeing him fail at manipulating somebody was kind of nice too. It was very humanizing for him too, and he's definitely my favorite character. So I have a bias. That one ranks high for me.
Well, and I think it's finally the moment that sets up Kimi as being a worthy adversary for our characters, and somebody that we're going to look forward to finally getting it at the end of the season.
Spoiler alert! Yeah, he doesn't last long. Like most of the non-scientist freighter people, the doctor and the pilot of the boat. What's the captain? That's the boat pilot name.
The captain is so worthless. He is a red shirt in his own way.
We haven't mentioned Michael yet.
Yeah, I was going to get to this episode. So all along, we have this idea that Ben has a spy on the freighter, somebody who's helping him. And when you talked about comics and Lost and saying that Lost needs comics, my reply was the only comic I really ever wanted was the character who I felt got the shortest shrift of anybody on the show. And that was Michael and his son, Walt. And that I would have loved a comic, even if it was just telling me what Walt's life was like after they got off of the island. I wanted to know more about Walt and Michael. And I think these characters are underutilized in a lot of ways. And that even his, and I hesitate to call it a redemption, but even like the ending to his story, I felt like was not enough and was not worthy.
I would agree. I would have liked to see more time with Michael. And I wonder if you could say that's one of the things that may have been affected by the writer's strike and this whole shortened season as a whole. Because I think I read that they had dropped a Claire flashback or a flash forward or something. Claire was cut significantly in this season because of the writer's strike and the shortened. I don't know. They dropped like 3 or 4 episodes, I think, from their original plan for season 4.
I'm not actually sure how many. Bueller is in the chat saying a little hello. Thank you for coming by, Mr. Bueller. I know that this season has 14 hours, but I think it amounts to 12 episodes. I know that it was cut significantly. This is the first season that had less than 20 hours. I think the first season has 26 hours.
It's too much.
It's a lot, and I kind of reiterate this point over and over again when people say, "Oh, well, it's no Game of Thrones," although. Fools on you now. People used to say that.
Exactly.
Talk about sticking the landing.
That's right.
I'm just gonna say it right now. People used to tell me all the time, "You like Lost? What about Game of Thrones?" That show's way better.
A little satisfying. Not gonna lie.
Pump the brakes there, buddy. Pump the brakes.
Rub it in a little bit.
Feels good. Sitting in the hot seat, wearing my Black Rock shirt.
Represent.
What I'm saying though is that it's not fair considering the restraints that a show like Lost had, whether it was the number of episodes produced in a season, whether it was dealing with commercials, network television restrictions, whether it was dealing with the inflexibility of network television, where a show like Game of Thrones can take a year and a half off, and Lost doesn't. Lost is back again September, ready to run new episodes. I think there's a lot of challenges that are unfairly forgotten when you can just binge watch a show like this.
Yeah, it's also Lost is kind of from a different time too. I had a weird moment today when I was watching some of the flash forwards, and when you hear the flash forwards, you think it's in the future, right? It's futuristic, but someone is recording Hurley's like escape from the police with a fold out camcorder and not a smartphone. Like it's a different era. Like
I think there's even still flip phones some of the time on this show. They're doing the flip phone.
We're old.
Yeah, so I don't want to skip over Walt and Michael's storyline. And you get this one flashback, Meet Kevin Johnson, this episode where we realize that Ben's spy on the boat is Michael, and that Michael is trying to earn redemption for the horrible, in my opinion, even somewhat uncharacteristic move of killing 2 innocent people that he knows to get his kid back. And doing so is probably, and I think he even kind of knows that it will most likely be requiring him to give his life. It seems like the whole episode has this hint of he knows what's coming.
And as a viewer, you're kind of trained by now, like to know that at the end of a certain character's episode, that there's always the potential that somebody could bite it during their own flashback sequence. And Michael was kind of brought out of nowhere for one season. And you could kind of tell that maybe he was not going to make it through this freighter storyline.
Absolutely,
but he does provide kind of a cool presence, I think, on the boat, and he's redeemed a little bit, mostly through Sun and Jin. In the finale. And I think that was another pair of characters who I think you were constantly wondering how do they end up. Only one of them makes it off the island, but the other doesn't. I think there was, getting to see the way Michael played a part in that a little bit was kind of interesting. Retro Savage jumped in, and I want to read what Hydra Collectibles said because it's definitely resonating with my experience. He says he's constantly defending Lost to others, and all those points that you mentioned, that I mentioned, come up. But if people give it a chance and rewatch, they'll definitely change their minds about the show and its ending. And I think that it's twofold because I know a lot of friends who've watched it in the streaming era and have been able to binge watch it. And for them, the little nitpicky stuff, I think it doesn't show up as much. But for me, the drawback becomes you lose the discussion half, which I think was a huge part of the show. Agreed. That's kind of why it was a presence in pop culture at the time, was because there was that week off in between where everybody had nothing to do except talk to each other about it. And you lose that now. Yeah. And having the time in between meant, it was the classic like water cooler show. I remember going to work and having friends that were Lost fans, and you'd be like, there you were the next day ready to talk about it and wanting to debate it. And of course I had my blog and my emails I was sending around to friends, and we were just crazy into it. It was a lot of fun though. My English class in high school spent a good time talking about Lost instead of actual stuff that we were supposed to be doing. So, well done you. Sounds like a good use of time. It was good. We got some serious topics discussed. There was a theme I wanted to mention that this season kind of throws out there. This idea that I know that the big theme for the first 3 seasons that repeated again and again was this idea that you could, given this opportunity of being stranded on an island, reinvent yourself in some ways. And a lot of our characters were not totally different, but certainly contrasting to the person they were before they arrived on the island. I think what, if anything, this season does is sort of the opposite, which kind of peels back a layer to say something along the lines of the person you think you're going to be when you get out of this situation is not necessarily who you think you'll be. That it's not so easy as, oh, I want this, it's going to work out well for me. Sometimes the thing you get when you want it so much doesn't work out the way you want it to. I think a lot of it is colored by the fact that they have to have this grand lie about their experience on the island, and that they have to pretend that they're the only ones that survived. And there's nothing to go back to. We don't need to worry about anybody else because they're trying to protect the island and protect all their friends. And I think on rewatching this season particularly, I noticed how Kate in particular has to look at Aaron every single day. And like that lie is like way more reverberated with her and, off the two of them. Especially knowing Claire and feeling like this kid is missing that from his life. Yeah, it's kind of tragic. Definitely. And then you've got Jack feeling like when he looks at Aaron, he's feeling horrible guilt for leaving people behind. Yep, that's true. Because most of this season is just him repeatedly basically
sacrificing everything for the idea that getting off the island will be better for everybody. And obviously, it's
that whole that transition from that into present day season 5 Jack, and everybody trying to get back. Like I love that turn his character takes into the final arc of the show for Jack. I think is my favorite part of his storyline.
You mean the final episode when we reveal who Jeremy Bentham is?
Oh no, I mean Jack's whole redemptive arc of becoming a man of faith. This is kind of his turning point, his rock bottom moment in life.
Gotcha.
From here to the end of the series, I like Jack the most, I think.
Yeah, and I think, like we said, a lot of the characters, after enough flashbacks and forwards, get repetitive. But I think, this is a great moment where Jack's character flips a switch, and it's not a smooth transition. There's a lot of mistakes that end up happening. It's not simply you be a man of science or you be a man of faith. He has to find the middle ground that fits him, and he doesn't manage that transition super well.
No.
But I do love the way Ben plays on that. And the Bentham storyline is a huge part of that. So I'm referencing Jeremy Bentham. For those that don't remember, this is a news article for a funeral for a character that we've never met, Jeremy Bentham, and it's clearly tearing Jack apart inside, and it's sort of leading him to drink and contemplate suicide and all these things in his future life that hint at the fact that he is now desperate to fix the mistake of leaving the island.
Right.
And we don't know who Jeremy Bentham is. This whole season, it's kind of subtly hinted at, but we don't have any clue. And I think the reveal at the end of the season, that final moment, is huge. And I remember seeing it and being like, oh, crap.
He's dead.
I had to wait all summer for the figuring out what the heck is going on here. And even then, it took a bunch of season 5 before they reveal what's going on.
Yeah. And then it makes you go back and rewatch the whole season in that time off, and you're trying to look for clues about where was John Locke this whole time in the future. But you don't see any of that.
The funeral. Oh my gosh. Hydra Collectibles just dropping knowledge in the chat. He says the funeral home, which I believe is Drawl and
Hofstraller.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be that guy.
It's an anagram of flash forward. That blew my mind.
Yep. They dropped a few hints throughout that season 3 finale before the ultimate twist at the end, like the Razor flip phone being such futuristic technology.
That's killer. Thank you, Kenny. Comic Head 84 has come by. He's another one of the alumni from this program, and I appreciate you coming by, brother. Don't tell me what I can't do, Walt. He's just screaming he's throwing out all the great exclamations from this show.
It's true. You must.
Why does the foot have 4 toes? Yeah. I don't know what is more disquieting, the fact that there's missing half the statue or that it only has 4 toes. It's a great Saeed line.
Of course, one of the best.
So we talked a little bit about lying, the lie that the characters who got off the island have to perpetuate. They have to repeat this over and over again. The fact that they were the only ones that survived. They have to keep the secret, mainly because they're worried that if people find out that there are more of them, it will put those people they left behind in danger. They're living with the concern or the hope that the people on the island are still alive. Yet at the same time, we as viewers are wondering what happened to them? Why didn't those people get off of the island? How did you feel about those final moments of understanding why our characters got separated?
It was very stressful to watch happen because you're looking at this boat the whole season and you're like, it's clearly big enough to hold everybody, even all the stupid red shirts who have no purpose. It's big enough to hold everyone. So why are there only 6 people that make it off in the end? So seeing those pieces fall into place, I think, is one of the best feelings this whole season can provide. I was a little upset that certain people made the cut and certain other people didn't. It would have been cool to get different people's flash forwards throughout this season, but it was ultimately a very cool decision, and I'm really glad they did it.
I think also the season 5 payoff is seeing what happened to the people that didn't make it off. It's almost like they get their flash forwards next season. But it's not a flash forward as much as it is like a skipping, the record skipping in time.
That's my favorite season. Oh, that's my favorite season. I go back and forth between 5 and 2, but I don't know, maybe 5.
Comic Head 84 says, "Oh shit, nice beard, Ryan. I dig it."
Well, thank you. Working
Ryan
on it.
Cleaned up for us. Bake the snake came by. Thanks for coming, brother. Yo Fi saying yo hi to the fire guy. No Kwanzaa. A long time no Kwanzaa.
I guess I know. I don't. Yeah, I'm sure. Long time no see.
Ryan's a busy guy. I've linked his channel below, and I know he hates that because he's like, I haven't put anything on my channel in 3 months. I don't care. You can go and watch several episodes of Top 5 that we did together. Ryan's Spider-Man live streaming. I also, though, linked, more importantly, the playlist that Comic Tom has for the entire Infinity Gauntlet breakdown that Ryan does with Comic Tom. It's amazing. They've just wrapped it up. It's all there. You can read and you could just list the whole dang thing from first to end. What is it? Soup to nuts, whatever it is. You can watch the entire Infinity Gauntlet breakdown with Ryan and Tom. It's phenomenal. I've seen every episode. It's great. And there are so many times they describe an issue, and I'm like, that's on my list now. I'm going to buy that. It sounds incredible.
Well, that was the original idea. Thank you, sir. We have like one retrospective kind of final episode that we're cooking up, and now that Tom is feeling better, I'm going to be trying to get up there between now and San Diego. I think he's going to be going to San Diego next weekend. Without me, I'm not going. That's too late. I got to work up to that.
But we all need more Tom and Ryan in our lives, and you can find their little links down below. I wanted to make sure I threw that out before we finish this all up.
Thank you.
We didn't speak much about a couple of different things. We didn't talk about what is ultimately become my new curiosity. And I want this to kind of be something that continues on through seasons 5 and 6. It's become like every time I feel like I come to a moment where I have a question that I don't think I can answer after watching the show so many times, I've been writing them down. And there are many that I've written down. Like there are definitely times I'm like, what are the whispers in this moment? Are they Jacob? Are they the Man in Black? Are they the others? Are they? And I don't have answers for every single one of those.
That's true.
Why the sand around Jacob's cabin? Because this connects to my big curiosity. How do I know when is it Jacob or when is it the Man in Black when we're seeing spirits around the island? Because it's not as simple as A or B. And there are definitely moments when I feel like this is a benevolent spirit and this is not a benevolent spirit. And there are moments when you're in the cabin and I'm feeling like this is the Man in Black. And then there's other times when I'm like, is this Jacob? So it's become my curiosity, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Ryan. Is it possible that everything all the way up to even into season 5, that we have not actually seen Jacob at all, and that everything is the Man in Black?
That was my understanding. I was also under the impression that Jacob did not have any sort of shape-shifting abilities of any kind, and that every sort of manifestation from Kate's horse to Jack's dad to Echo's brother, that they were all the Man in Black manipulating people and trying to steer them into death, I feel like, to kind of clear the board of Jacob candidates. Not to get too in deep into future season plot lines, but...
So then my question is, why the sand around the cabin? Because the cabin is clearly a pivot point, a place where Ben has been going to get information or to commune.
Yeah.
Where because although Ben admits at one point, and it seems honest, that he has never heard Jacob speak. So I don't know how that works when he's talked to Ghost Mom, how he feels like he's never heard Jacob speak. Interesting, though.
I think that was the Man in Black, too, right? Because wasn't he outside the fence trying to get Ben to run through the fence?
Yeah.
Like, come out here and join me, and you might get your brains melted through your ears if you join me, but we won't mention that part.
Drew Manchu has come by. Thank you, brother. We're not having book club. Alec has just officially been, I think, 1 full day in Florida. He's just moved. I don't want to say across the country. It's more like down the country. And it was just easier to sort of take a week off and give him that time. And I needed to fit in a spot for this, and it fit in Ryan's schedule. So we sort of, we replaced book club with Lost. So I'm sorry if you're expecting a good book club chat.
Not a worthy replacement, unfortunately. It's not
certainly not as far as the number of views or likes or comments go on my channel. But this is not a show I do for analytics. This is a show I definitely do just for me and this handful of awesome people who've come by the chat.
We love you. We love you all.
So my ongoing curiosity has been, when is this the Man in Black, or when is it Jacob? Because I definitely feel like there are moments when the ghost spirits are not doing things that necessarily benefit the Man in Black. They may necessarily just be stirring the pot, and maybe that's the Man in Black's kick. He just likes to see the people squirm. He's playing with his dinner. I don't know. But there are definitely times when he's not necessarily helping himself.
The way I assume it works is the monster, like the smoke monster, like scans you, like we see it do with Juliet, and then
or Echo or Locke.
Echo, correctly. And then after he scans you, he can change into like Echo's brother, for example. Now that he knows your brain and knows your past, so you just have to kind of assume that at some point, like, these characters have been scanned, because he starts playing with Jack as his dad pretty early on, and I don't think Jack had ever had like a face-to-face with the monster until further down the line. But it seems to somehow know how to get under people's skin.
And Drew mentions that the sand line is broken, which comes up in season 6, where there's a group that say, "Oh, the line is broken." In which case, it doesn't seem like the cabin is all that important anymore. But they make the cabin seem important. And then who broke the sand line? There's lots of little questions about that kind of stuff that never really get answered. And I'm fine. I don't need those answers. But for me, it did make me very curious to kind of really look at all the spirits and all the moments that they happen and question what, if we agree blindly that this is the malevolent spirit of the island, what is it trying to accomplish at each of those moments? What is its end goal?
Do you have a moment in particular that is confusing you?
It's a myriad of little things that are happening. Well, what's the function here? What is it trying to accomplish there? I mean, I can understand it just messing with Locke to push his faith, but it seems to want something from Locke, and it seems to want something from everybody.
The grand scheme with Locke is to build him up and make him think he's got this crazy destiny, and that all of this is building to something, and to get him to kind of sacrifice himself for the island, right? I thought the whole plan of the Man in Black was to get him killed and then his body brought back so he could be re-manifested as a walking corpse kind of thing, like Christian Shepherd was. Maybe he was alive that whole time, like Jack's dad, which would explain why the coffin was empty.
Yeah, and
now my brain is it's
a fun place to put your mind, and I think the chat's having a similar conversation. I think Drew Manchu's got 2 great comments. He says it was never Jacob's cabin; it was a ploy that was conceived by Ben to mess with Locke. But it can't be that simple, because clearly a lot of other characters know about the cabin, right? All of our Ajira airline people from later seasons, they go straight there. They know about the cabin. I know that Richard Alpert knows about the cabin. He understands the cabin. So I think there is a larger scale connection to the cabin beyond just a simple device that Ben is using. But I do agree that Ben is using it and is manipulated by it.
Like, he clearly brought John there in season 3 to kind of do a dog and pony show, but he didn't expect ghosts to actually be there and things to actually start happening.
He was surprised by what the Man in Black did, right?
Exactly.
Which we can all agree that moment was the Man in Black trying to mess. But again, what was the Man in Black trying to accomplish in that moment? By rattling things and lighting things and appearing for a second in a chair, what's his goal there? What's his point?
As much as I love The Man Behind the Curtain, I feel like that honestly might be one of the moments where they were kind of winging it.
And there's jokes about that, yeah.
Okay.
Writers jacked up on coffee. Maybe they're jacked up on something stronger than coffee.
Yeah, I feel like they did the man behind the curtain before they kind of had everything ironed out with the cabin and the man in black and, you know, whoever is trapped in there. And it felt a little unanswered to me, especially looking back.
And again, I'm definitely somebody who feels like if I tallied up the questions I had versus the questions they answered, I think I came out on the plus in a big way. I never felt like I needed any of these things. But this is the core of the stuff I find very interesting about the show and that it's fun to talk about. I think that Hydra Collectibles says, I put it down to manipulation. The smoke monster is happy to put himself down at times if it pays for, it'll pay off later.
Agreed.
So that could be a big part of it as well, right? That Machiavellian thing.
Like, I'm going to change myself into a horse and walk around in the jungle for no discernible reason, just to mess with people's minds. It can only benefit me. Makes sense.
I was going to say, there were several people talking about, I don't know that I want to get into the minutia a little bit. I know that the Widmore Ben stuff is important later on. This idea that there's a fight for the island going on that's been going on for a long time, so long that they have like rules about how they can treat each other.
Yeah, there's like rules of engagement, apparently. Don't hurt daughters, but that got broke.
Yeah, and so obviously Widmore is trying to get his men on the island. Ben is trying to keep them off, but at the same time, it's not like Ben is strongly connected to the island in a way that's going to spiritually enlighten. He definitely has his own power he wants to reap from this situation. He's not doing this to be altruistic in any sort of way. In the dictionary next to white dude is your picture, D-Runk. People taking some shots at D-Runk coming in the chat.
That's mean. What do you got to say that for? My picture's in there.
D-Runk says, damn that, man, I'm black. I don't know what that means.
Typo. I assume that's a typo. Man in black. My phone changes in time all the time.
In black. Yeah, I think is what he meant to say. I think you could definitely do a special all on Ben. I think Ben is a character that is fascinating.
I want to be involved.
I made the comment that I still have questions about why Ben does certain things at certain times when it seems definitely like he puts the island in jeopardy. And it's possible that he cares about his own power more than the island. It's hard for me to grasp where where he would balance those things in his own mind.
What his true motivations are?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
For me, it's the moment when he basically convinces the man in black and Ben are basically convincing John to blow up the hatch, which seems like it all puts the island in huge jeopardy. Which maybe the man in black could get something out of, but Ben seems like that's like the stupidest thing he could do.
I'm distracted by the chat. Hydra just blew my mind.
It's a stretch, but when we see taller Walt with John, are we sure it's not older Walt from his time after all these events? New man in charge, using time travel to get back to that moment.
I had never considered that before.
Wow. I'm so excited to have Hydra Collectibles join me for the next chat.
Me too.
This is going to be mind-blowing. I can already tell I found another kindred spirit here in this lost community.
Likewise. I always just figured they shot him from below to hide his height. And I mean, that is the practical reason they shot him from such a weird, tall angle. But I never considered that they had figured that 3 seasons ahead that he's going to be,
And clearly I need Drew Manchu to join me at some point too. He says the man in black is trying to corrupt the candidates like Satan would. And Jacob doesn't interfere, much like God, right? Like a benevolent God.
Yeah.
And he also says the cabin goes from Ben messing with Locke to the man in black messing with Ben and probably Locke at the same time. And then later he says tests of faith by making him think Locke saw Jacob when he never had.
Genius. because he could pretend to be Jacob because nobody really knows what Jacob looks like because he's presumably been trapped in this cabin the whole time.
And you could argue he's pretended to be Jacob for pretty much everybody who ever saw Jacob, except for Richard Alpert.
Right. Okay.
Hard to say.
Ugh.
This has been a lot of fun, and I think season 4 is a real linchpin at a season. You can see where you have almost like Lost before and after we have to go back. And this definitely is now spinning the show towards finale, because this is a very short season, and the last 2 are not terribly long in the sense they're not 26 hours or what have you.
Yeah.
We are way past the midway point on this show, and you can see the writers seeing the end line. And I think that really speeds and ramps some things up. Do you feel that way too, Ryan, when you watch this season and on into the 5th?
You can tell that because the first 3 seasons, it was just the same formula, like you were saying at the beginning, just like present day flashback, and now we've got flash forwards, and then we're going to have even more crazy perceptions of the way time works in season 5, and then there's alternate reality stuff in season 6, and you can kind of see them loosening their own rules in a way, like Ben and Widmore status. And they're just playing with stuff. They clearly know what they're building towards an ending, and they're setting a lot of the pieces into play in this 4th season.
And yes, Comic Head 84, the frozen donkey wheel, which I used in the in the thumbnail for this video, makes its first appearance here in the finale, where we see Ben move the island, which is kind of the last element we haven't really talked about. But the idea that the kinetic energy or the physical energy that this island possesses can be manipulated, and that Ben somehow knows how. We don't know how Ben had learned this or where he figured this out, but he turns the little wheel, and this is what makes him land in the desert in his parka later on. And in doing so, he shifts the island and it vanishes, and the Oceanic Six, along with Frank Lapidus and Desmond, are forced to ditch their helicopter into the ocean, which is a pretty bad special effect, but we're not really going to deal with the bad special effects. And they're eventually rescued by Penny Widmore, who is out looking for Desmond in her boat, and they concoct this plan to have the Oceanic Six arrive onto a nearby island as if they had somehow been surviving all this time on their own. And Penny, Frank Lapidus, and Desmond can make shore leave somewhere else and act as though they never knew anything about any of this.
I have several acquaintances from back in the day who I know dropped off the show at the moment that Ben spun the wheel and knocked the island out of time or whatever. That becomes the moment when there's no going back. The show is definitely hard sci-fi. Like, it gets really, really weird here. And there's no going back from that moment, I think.
And I will say, I think people who stuck with the show loved season 5. And and I think you mentioned it was one of your favorites. I know Hydra Collectibles mentioned it's one of his favorites. And for me, until I started this rewatch, 5 was the season I looked back on with the most fondness. I loved the time travel stuff. I love the nerdy science stuff. I'm less interested in the Man of Faith stuff, and the Man of Science stuff I get super geeky about and think is just trippy cool.
Me too.
Yes, Comics Misexplained, you should watch Lost.
Yes.
That's the lesson you should take from this whole thing. And I wanted to shout out Decaf Raven, who I haven't seen in a chat for a while. It's good to see you, brother. Thank you for jumping by. He says he got up to season 3, but he doesn't remember anything. Then it's time to get Hulu and start just, finish your Stranger Things and then watch something really amazing.
Oh, burn.
But also strange.
Yes.
So season 5 is what we're talking about next. Mr. Hydra Collectibles here in the chat is going to join me somewhere in the beginning of August, and we're going to talk about season 5 of Lost. If you haven't watched, you have several weeks, maybe even almost a month, where you could binge watch. You only have to get through 5 seasons. You have to finish the show, although I promise if you get through 5, you'll have a hard time not finishing. It's that good. And then you can join us in the chat for another episode of Get Lost, where we're going to break it down, discuss themes, ask questions, look at character arcs, and really decide what we feel about this show and this particular chunk of episodes. Here is my long-term goal now that we're nearing the end. In August, we're going to be watching season 6. And somewhere in September or October, I'm going to do a finale episode of this series, where anybody who's been a guest on this show, Ryan, Bueller, Perry, Mr. Miracle, can all come and join us, and we will just talk about how this show ended. Because for me, that seems to be the biggest debate of the show, period. The amount of people who joke, use Lost as a punchline, or simply just throw out as if it's fact that this show didn't stick the landing. And I really take umbrage with that, because I don't think it's a fair statement.
If my brother's still in here, he just him and I were just watching Lost stuff before we went live, and he looks at me and he goes, "I thought they were all in purgatory," and I had to set him straight a little bit. That's the common misconception about the ending of this show, unfortunately.
And I think a lot of those people who feel like it didn't stick the landing were the ones who gave up on the show before the ending and then maybe just watched the finale. And it's not a show that you could ever do that.
No.
I think if you stuck with it through an episode or two that you didn't like, or even a season that you were frustrated with, you would have been rewarded by the time you got to the end. And there's your brother making an emoji at us.
Love you.
As someone who hasn't seen the ending, he's looking forward to it. I talked with Perry after we did our episode, and he was saying, I only got this far, and there were a lot of questions I had left, and almost every question he had, I was able to say, stick with it. You're going to get there. You're going to get there. So he'll be an awesome guy to get to the end with and kind of see, after all this time, how he feels the show stuck its landing.
I'm looking forward to that finale episode. That's going to be fun. It's
going to be a blast. So thank you again, Ryan, for being the only person so far to have to repeat on this. Much appreciated.
I'm down. It was fun. It's Lost.
I was so excited to talk comics and Lost tonight.
What are you gonna do when it's done? You're just gonna start again?
I'm gonna have to pick another show that nobody likes and start
things
over.
That I missed on my first rewatch of Lost. But now it's time for round 2. We have to go back again.
Oh man, I'm gonna do Quantum Leap.
That's it. For my time.
Oh, I have the whole box set right up there.
I think I've seen it. I've seen it in your background.
I've got everything over here, so let's just be honest.
Yeah,
they're throwing out Twin Peaks. I'm gonna get a little bit of hate right now. Never finished Twin Peaks.
Dude, I'm all over that one. I've got the.
So maybe Ryan needs to run that live stream, and I'll have to watch and pull a Perry and then join in.
There you go. That'd be interesting. Be interested to see what your thoughts are on that. We haven't had a Twin Peaks talk before.
Well, that's because I've never really watched much more than a little of the first season, and then I finally was like, I don't think I smoke enough weed to like this show.
The times have changed, John. The times have changed.
Now it's totally normal. Dark Angel, Decaf Raven says. Do Alias.
See, now you got nothing but options for next time. This will be fun.
Jennifer Garner's a hottie. Okay. Thank you all for coming by. And I appreciate you taking the time. Feel free to leave a comment if there's something that you felt like we didn't get to that you want to let us know about. And Hydra Collectibles, get watching season 5 because I'm coming for you next month. Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Ryan.
Good night, everyone.